Hi, listeners, and welcome to Mic Discipline, a special segment of 80K After Hours, where we take your feedback very seriously and speak carefully into our mics about, about topics that matter to us in an audio quality that you appreciate. I'm Matt Reardon from the One-on-One team.
I'm Bella Forrestal from marketing.
I'm Cody Fenwick from the content team.
And our special guest, MGRD herself, which is a name that I just made up for her. Maria Gutierrez Rojas. Maybe Duda. Duda's not actually in your name.
But it would be fun.
It's a really good last name.
It is very... Yeah. Also, it means doubt in Spanish.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Roman doubt.
Yeah.
Wow.
My dad makes all sorts of bad dad jokes about it. Okay. Every single... Well, anyways.
So Maria has many claims to fame. Beyond just her name and the acronyms you can make out of it.
So that is definitely the best one.
You're an artist who both worked with 80K and created the famous ice cream meme that people may know. And you worked in television. And after Did you? I mean, according to your LinkedIn, which is all I have to rely on.
Oh, I guess, yeah. I guess I did.
My parents loved Blue Bloods, is all I'm saying.
I mean, I did work in Blue Bloods.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, it is kind of cool.
Yeah.
It makes me feel more real or something.
You were also the face of the 80K Jobs newsletter for a long time. That's how I first knew you.
Oh, people always used to come up to me at EAGs and be like, Maria! And I was like, no, not even close.
It's the eyebrows or something.
I guess.
Also, it's weird because I feel like my face in that newsletter looked a bit like me, but not totally like me.
Right.
So it works in half the way one would expect. Like people, instead of just being like, Maria from the newsletters, they just stare like this. And they're trying to work out whether it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Mm-hmm.
Wait, Matt, do people ever think you're me from the newsletter?
Oh, yeah, that would make sense.
I mean, I don't get out enough to even get this feedback. So Maria, you are an artist.
Yeah, I would.
And
I would say so.
And consistent with my introduction, right? This is the first episode that we are recording after the first episode of this production was released. So we've gotten all your feedback, and so
And I've seen the first episode. I'm like kind of know what I'm walking into.
Okay.
And so now I want to ask our kind of resident like EA art critic, whether my podcast is like the swap card of EA podcasts.
I'm glad you asked me that because it was in your notes, and I completely did not.
Totally shattering illusions.
I mean, it was a very unpolished, random. Well, I'm gonna proceed. I did not understand what it meant at all.
Yeah, what is the swap card of EA podcast?
I'm so lost.
So,
I'm glad you asked because I'm so lost.
So if, like all of our listeners, you're just overactive in EA Twitter, you'll have noticed that every time an EA conference comes around, we have this app called Swap Card, and people complain about it a lot as being a terrible kind of user experience.
Oh.
And I don't know, you care about user experience, don't you?
Yeah, I see. I mean, this is maybe the time for me to say what I mean, like what kind of artist I feel like I am or not. Like, I just don't care about how pretty or good the sound is, or I mean, if it had been like really hard to hear or something, I would have been like, yo, it was hard to hear. But like, I feel like I have very compartmentalized, like, do I care about the aesthetics of this or do I not? Right. It is pretty radical. And it is not what people would expect. They're like, is my logo ugly? Is my website ugly? And I'm like, I don't care. Can it be more like Wikipedia where it doesn't matter if it's ugly or not? Like, can we just stop worrying it? I like have a bunch of things where today people worry about aesthetics in that domain. And maybe not everyone, but I want me to stop worrying. And like, I just don't care.
How's the 80K website on this metric?
I haven't been in a while.
Okay.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I would have thought. I mean, my take on the 80K website was always like, okay, wait, something. The images are great. That has changed since I've left. I don't know who's doing it right now, but when I left, Louisa was putting effort into finding better images, and she found better images. Like, the images are just now beautiful, and I think that helps a lot. I don't know. I feel like I was just gonna be a parrot. Like, maybe there's too much effort in making some things more pretty, where I'm just like, just add some space. Like, I don't know. I think it's very pretty. I think sometimes it could use less things, but like, it's just pretty spacious recently.
So Marie, you probably didn't see this, but I imagine Cody and Bella, you both did. There's this guy on Twitter who was trying to like make a name for himself as a graphic designer. So he would just go around like finding websites with, I guess, a decent amount of traffic, and just like tweeting at them, being like, "Hey, I redesigned your homepage. How do you like this?"
That's cool.
And yeah, the one he had for us was something like it was a lot more white, and it was like a little 80K stuff, I think, on the left side, and then there was kind of like this little like fine like arrow weaving path kind of thing towards like, here are the steps we want you to take and what we want you to read and stuff. What did Bella and Cody think of this?
Oh, I really liked it a lot. I think, yeah. I like most of the 80K website. I do think the front page looks a bit out of date, not like quite as contemporary as you'd want it to be. And so that something like that looked really good. But like actually implementing it, I am aware, would just take a lot of work and our time. And so I'm not sure it's worth putting the effort into at the moment. But yeah.
Like, unfortunately, the fact is that just so many of the design elements on the 80K site, including the homepage, have just been tested against like obvious alternatives and proven better. And we're just like, I don't know, man, this kind of works. Like, yeah, maybe that thing looks more slick, it looks more modern, but the thing that doesn't look modern also gets people to read stuff and maybe do stuff with their career. And so I'm kind of reluctant to do anything else.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like when people spend important time and resources really trying to get something to look better that it already satisfies, you know?
Yeah. I think in my ideal world it would look better and be more functional, but I think it is hard to do both at the same time. This would take a lot of effort, like Cody said, and I'm just not sure, like, without testing it, I'm not sure that this guy's alternative is better, and so I'm just like...
Maybe a semi-spicy take is that I often think they're like things that are aesthetic but are not visually aesthetic, that are more important than the visual aesthetics, and this applies to many domains. But the example in the 80K website would be like the cognitive structure of what is trying to be said. I would like that to be more aesthetically pleasing in a non-visual way, like just better organized, like or something.
Just because we have a lot of information, and it'd be easier if it were.
And I think it's easy to try to think that the problem comes from from visual aesthetics,
as opposed to like the structure of the information and how it's presented to
readers. I think we've also made some efforts in this direction over the years, right?
Oh, I think you have made good progress as well.
Well, but I think we also so okay, I wasn't around, I didn't like get involved in this, but my understanding is that the key ideas thing was
back and forth. Do we like it? Do we not like it?
Yeah. And we're now on the not, so I'll tell you why. My understanding is that part of the motivation was to make the things like more like philosophically clean. So it was like having like from first principles, why do we think what we think? Like, here's an introduction to like, okay, what is morality even? How do you think about it? And then like kind of go from there. Like, yeah. And I think this basically didn't actually help people, it seems, or like it didn't help people more than the previous presentation of the same information. And so we've like gone back from promoting like having key ideas as a cornerstone of the content, and instead it's like career guide plus advanced series. And I think this seems like the right call. It's like less intellectually aesthetically pleasing or something, but like actually better for people to use and navigate, seems like.
Yeah,
just based on feedback and so on.
So anyway, we don't know anything about aesthetics on priors, even Maria.
That seems right. Internally right.
But you do care about content. And I think your content feedback for our first episode was that you wanted to plumb the depths of Cody's soul and my soul a bit more. That is what I wanted. So I was apparently... I have a big purity vibe, which maybe I even used the word purity.
And I also have a big purity vibe.
Okay, that's interesting to me. Especially given the conversation like
his
we had
purity
before.
vibe is like being like, no, she doesn't have a purity vibe. Well, yeah, especially the conversation we just had.
And then Cody is lonely.
Yeah.
Is that how I came off in the first?
I literally wrote a bullet point that says, it was just a quote of what you said, which was like, yeah, but I've always been lonely, and that's true of everyone. And like when I was in my beanbag listening to the episode, I almost paused it and was like, preach it, and then I continued it.
Oh, preach it.
Yeah.
Huh.
I also loved your I'm never lonely.
Well, it's not I'm never lonely, but I basically
not really
never have the emotion of I'm like, oh, I'm feeling sad because I am lonely.
I think we should. Can we start with the lonely thing?
Sure.
Okay. Why was that such a good moment for me?
Because two people made semantically opposite claims that meant the same thing syntactically.
Right.
How?
Where,
Break it down for me.
Where Bella says she's never been lonely, i.e., she's never felt sad about being lonely.
Yeah,
and Cody
I see.
says, I've always been lonely, but I feel fine about it.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I guess one of my best friends would define that as the difference between lonely and alone.
Right.
If you don't care, you're alone, but you're not lonely. If you're fine with it. If you care, you might not be alone. You might be surrounded by people, but you're lonely. I mean, I feel like I've always been lonely, and even more strongly, because not always. I think I've had a lot of support and intimacy in some periods of my life, but I do have this big feeling of like your second part of that, and that's true for everyone. I'm like, surely people are loads more lonely that they let on. I don't see how this is not true. I'm not claiming that is actually true, but that is my
Your feeling.
disposition towards the world. Is like, surely everyone's like horribly lonely and doesn't speak about it. And like the Cody personality that like can say this and laugh a bit, and it's also true, and it's not that horrible that I can't say it. I don't know, I just love that moment.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I don't know. I do have a dog, so I do. He does provide me company, but of course, you know, the company a dog provides you is very interesting because it's like there's no hiding how much they're providing you, but it only goes a certain way, right? They're not interacting with. I mean, I feel very close to him, but we also, I mean, we have very different personalities. He's more social,
And a dog.
And a dog.
I don't know. I mean, I think like
He likes licking the pavement more. He likes eating poop more than you do.
Yeah, largely.
We should have a ticker for like how many times Matt rolls his eyes. He just did the first one.
Yeah, where was I going with that? I don't know. No, I've just known dogs who I felt like my personality was a closer match for. Ollie and I, my current dog, we don't have the same personality. I think we have pretty different dispositions toward the world, but like we also like I think we both have this attitude of like, well, we're in this together, you know, which is yeah.
Do you wanna and like feel free to stop whenever, and I can just overshare me when you want to stop oversharing. But like, can you tell me more about your loneliness in general? The like that like reaction of like I've always been lonely, and like that's just true, and it's kind of unfortunate, but it's also true or something.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I'm just very in my head a lot, and like so I think about a lot of questions and a lot of like issues and just like a lot of like interactions. I'll just kind of replay over and over about how they went, but like also like I'm often thinking about philosophical questions and like what am I prioritizing? Am I prioritizing the right things? Am I working on the right things? Should I be doing something different? Should I like be kind of like radically overthrowing the way I think about things? Like, you know, I just have very like questioning disposition, and I feel like that's just kind of like a lonely place to be in some ways, just intrinsically, because you know I could decide that like, oh, everybody at 80K actually it turns out they're thinking about the problems the wrong way, and like maybe I'll come to that conclusion, and then like if I did, then it's like, well, then I have to figure something out, and that's just on me.
And in theory, I mean, I'm with you, but in theory, couldn't there be kinds of people that are like this, very in their head, very questioning, and have a lot of sharing of that kind of stuff?
Maybe, but I think it always just does come back to you, or at least in my case, it feels like it always just comes back to me. And so like I feel like everything's like always a bit tentative, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I got the tentative part. Oh. Is it
well because
like...
because you can always question everything.
Yeah,
I
see what you mean.
Like every relationship you could have, you could always be you like always should at some point ask the question like, oh, is this the right relationship to keep pursuing at this time?
Yeah.
Whereas I think I think some people like don't have that disposition as much, where people are more like just like, oh no, I'm in this.
A lot of non-loneliness is just in fact being like anchored and fully committed to like other specific people regardless of what they think. And if you think a whole bunch, like now you're gonna disagree a whole bunch, and, and if thinking is the priority, then like that could like unanchor you in the relevant sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think it seems similar to me. My loneliness feels like there's a lot of shit going on in my head, and like I don't really get enough opportunities to share the parts of it that I feel like I would want to share.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a funny thing about like conversations where like if you're going to meet somebody and talk for like an hour, it kind of feels at the start you're like, like it's an hour, we're going to meet for an hour, like we could talk about so much, and then like you actually get into it, and by the end you're like, oh my god, there's so much stuff I didn't say. And like there's so many different rabbit holes that we could have pursued in that conversation, but we chose like a certain path. And I don't know. Yeah,
I'm so lonely that I'm excited about this podcast episode because I get to talk to you guys, and like that's the main thing is just like I get to talk.
Anyway, that was a long detour into loneliness, and a self-indulgent one, if I may say so myself. Let's talk about something more profound.
Religion
And purity.
Right.
Maria, are you a pure person? So for context, I mentioned the conversation that we had before the podcast was about Ayala, who we mentioned on a previous episode. And you know what kind of topics Ayala likes. Sex, very explicitly, lots of sex things. And Maria was very enthusiastic about a recent kind of like viral thing that Ayala had posted. And that seemed like, I don't know, maybe it cut a little bit against this idea of purity. So square these for me, Maria.
Ooh. I mean, should I first start with my purity and then be like, how does it not break down by me liking Ayala or something?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. I guess this is not like a label that feels very like naturally internal or something. I just realize when I'm like trying to explain things that I like or why I want things to be a certain way or stuff to people, just like the evidence says that I end up describing something like purity like extremely often. So that's one thing.
Wait, can you give an example of something that you wanted to...
I feel like most activity, like peak activities and peak interests. So like things like best book I read, Matt just asked me, best book I read in last year. It's called Math Without Numbers. And it's just this book about math. And it doesn't even have numbers. So it's like the pure essence. Ooh, I was so excited that I slammed my head. Pure essence. And like so many things that can be described of like the pure essence of things. So, or like what I want to spend my mind time on.
You want like the purest cocaine.
I mean, to complement that, and like art, I feel very similar about art. And I'm like, no, graphic design, no, let me paint. Like, let me just paint. Graphic design is a business, okay?
Interesting.
Or something.
Surely maybe graphic design's pure because it's abstracted away from like real world pigments and stuff. You can just like pick.
I mean, you can also paint abstractly, but graphic design has other purposes, which in some grades, in some sense, is functional. Which I'm not saying is better or worse. In some senses, it's less vain. It just has a purpose. It does good things. But I don't know.
Okay, this is interesting because when you brought up purity, I was thinking you meant purity more in the wholesome sense that I was just referring to.
Well, it's not so. I feel like I have just these purity patterns. So like, this is one that doesn't have like, I guess, moral vibes. But then also, I'm just a goody two shoes. So like, I guess I was religious growing up, and I was like I wanted to be religious. It was important for me. I'm on board with this religious. And it came with a lot of like very happy not to do drugs, very happy not to get drunk, very happy not to, I don't know, I'm just a goody two shoes. Like that's where I feel comfortable. And now, not being religious, I'm like still a goody two shoes. And
you are turning me on to like the literal definition of purity probably has a lot to do with like simplicity and one-dimensionality. And maybe like the religious context is like, well, I live in the world. What's the world about? It's about one thing. It is about like God and the right and the good.
Yeah.
And so that's all there is. And that's like, in some sense, like you want the world to be very pure and very focused on this one thing. The way that like you can be focused on lots of any one things, you know, Ayala is.
Yeah. Okay. You really want to talk about
that? I just like to animate, like, you know, I think a lot of people think purity and they think of wholesomeness and goodness and this kind of thing as being like, that's purity. But really purity can be anything. And you appreciate the kind of anything kind of purity nowadays, at least.
Yeah. Ayala. I guess purity and openness don't usually trade off quite a bit. And I am very, very strong in both. And so Ayala, I guess she does challenge me a lot. Like, I'm not saying, to me, it's not like an easy experience. Like, just reading her. Like, there's just tons of signals and little things that go like, freak out and don't know what's going on and don't want to know about this world and don't want to know about this person. And sometimes it's okay and right to listen to those. And I've felt that in this instance, it's just been completely right not to. I'm just like, I don't know. I just find her a person whose like narrative of just like her experience in life, I kind of really understand. Because I'm a goody two shoes. Maybe because I'm a goody two shoes, I find it enriching to like understand her perspective and her experiences or something like that. And yeah, I'm scared like a bit. Like it's like when I first knew about her and started reading, it was this kind of like scary, challenging experience for me, and it sometimes still is. But I don't know. I kind of respect and appreciate her nonetheless. Maybe even more so or something.
It's like people who like horror movies.
Not quite.
Well, like you can really love a
It's
horror
like-
movie, but it's like kind of scary and kind of like off-putting at times. But like you're really drawn into
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
That's kind of what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like that anymore, I think, but it's like, so basically there's like what I actually think reflectively about a bunch of things and whether they're right or wrong. And then there's my intuitions. And like, obviously there's a bunch of things about anything that's not a very too goody, two shoes traditional life that will always and forever set off my intuitions. And that's just how it's going to be. And they don't have to be matched. Sometimes they're matched by what I think is right and wrong, and sometimes they're not matched by what I think is right and wrong. And so, like, because my intuitions are pretty extremely old school and, like, conservative, like, I just have to get used to the idea that many times they are not a guide to morality. And that's just, like, now a part of my life, like, and it's a fun part of my life. Like, I think one of the best, I've a funny, like, kind of like archetypical memory that I have is like one of my first boyfriend, I don't know, good friend of mine now. I was dating in like high school or after high school, and I was very Christian, and he's like just didn't care / atheist, and his mom is a yoga teacher who like probably, I don't know, believes in something related to Indian religion, and there's like basically in their house there's like a bunch of many armed elephants. And I was grown up and intelligent by that point, and I was still kind of freaked out by these many armed elephants, and it was so ridiculous to me that I was just like, it's there, it's the many armed elephant, something seems odd and wrong about it. And like now,
Just as a non-Christian religious icon?
yeah. And it's so obvious how like this is just an object, and that is the truth about it. And I could not, it was so strong for me. And I still remember that. And now, because time has passed and I've just familiarized myself with other things and like also the world and yoga and like that kind of stuff, like I'm now like, yay, hello, many armed elephant. You know, like whenever I see one of those, I'm like, funny, kind people. That's the association I have with that. That are a bit too like maybe westernizing things that mean something different to, yeah, maybe that's a bit awkward or something. But I don't know. Now I just have positive vibes. But anyways, I think there's a lot of Ella to me. Like, and it helps me explore.
She's a many-armed elephant.
Yeah, she's a many-armed elephant, and she helped me explore when I think my intuitions have something of value and when they don't. And she's up for being challenged on those things a lot. And she can't talk about having had similar intuitions once, which is unexpected and cool.
Yeah, she has a Christian background as well.
Yeah.
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 So your experience,
Of what?
Ella.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, maybe I am not as deep or open about my, attitudes. It's just like, it kind of grosses me out and makes me cringe, and I feel like this is too low stakes that I don't need to think very much about it or engage with it. And so it comes across it comes to my attention every so often, and I'll mention it because it's kind of funny and extreme, in a way things in this genre are often interpreted. But then, it kind of passes out of my notice, and I feel like I don't need to confront it very much, so I don't.
I think that's so fine. I think Ella's so cool that she would think it's fine. I mean, maybe not, maybe sometimes, maybe, I don't know. Like, you need to pick your battles in life, right? You're not saying, I don't know, like, there are intuitions that I have that I'm like, I don't want to explore that. Like, and I don't want to I can't challenge myself in everything. I just need to let those be. If one day when I'm 60 they change, well, fun. But if not, then not.
Yeah, I mean, come to think of it, I'm probably actually closer to your position. I was thinking again about why do I bring her up when I do? And I think it's usually just to have an example of someone who's just like really going for it and trying to like live her life and figure things out, and like, yeah, this is what she's into, and clearly it's not what most people, at least publicly, are into. But it's like a way, it's just like a thing that you can point to say like, look, you can care about whatever you want, just go deep on it.
Yeah.
And like, here's someone going deep on something that you might never imagine yourself going deep on, but like, think about the whole vast world of things that you could go deep on, and instead, I don't know, you just kind of like go through the motions of your day-to-day life. Like, you don't have to live that way. You can be more extreme.
Yeah.
And extreme people make the world interesting.
Yeah.
Ayala is certainly interesting.
Yeah. Do you want to tell me more about your past religiousness? I'm extremely interested.
Yeah, unfortunately it's going to be extremely uninteresting.
You're too sure of that. I just find religiousness extremely interesting.
So I do have one like interesting anecdote from when I was a little kid that relates to this. And yeah, I think there was like this general theme of like me taking adults really seriously and like believing what they said. And I like mentioned this on the first episode. And so, I don't know, adults told me that God was real and that like, well, you live for however long you live, I don't know, 70, 80 years. And then eternity gets decided based on what you did with those 70, 80 years. And eternity is either bliss or it's hell. And I was like, okay, that decision calculus is pretty easy. I really shouldn't care too much about what happens in this life because the next one's a whole lot bigger. And so like everything's about God. Everything is about not sinning and doing right and stuff. And so one interesting example of this is like, you know, I was like a 7 or 8 year old boy, and I kind of had like, I felt like really pulled by like violence and stuff like that. So I got like this toy sword one day, I remember, and my dad didn't really want to get it for me because, you know, he thinks violence is bad, being all mature and stuff. But anyway, I talked him into it and I got the thing. Aww. And, you know, I didn't have friends. So
you didn't have friends.
So I
also didn't have friends.
So I had to LARP on my own or whatever, and I had to like imagine who I was fighting with my toy sword and stuff like that. And I was like, wait, killing is wrong. That's in the 10 Commandments. Can't do that. Can't even imagine.
So why am
that.
I using it?
That'd be bad. But I found a loophole. I was like, I can fight demons in the name of God and stuff like that. So basically, I just had to route all of my decisions and actions through this decision calculus of like, what would God think of this? Is it right? And stuff like that. And I just like, you know, I just did that for a bit too long. Well, I don't know if too long is the right answer here, because I think it was kind of a good intuition to have and explore and nurture, in the sense that like, all right, when I like updated my empirical beliefs about the world, and thought about whether God was real or whether this particular God was real or something like that, like when I undid that, I didn't undo the thing where it's like, yeah, there is just like some purpose that I should have in life, some higher thing that I should be like comparing my decisions to or weighing them up against. And so I don't know, that's why I'm like this morality dude now, working at this morality org.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because I was thinking, this isn't morality at all, what you were describing before. It was just like a very rational, prudential calculation to be like, 70 years of my life is nothing compared to infinity of bliss or torture. And that's just like a really good
I was reading it as...
But that can be purely egoistic, right?
I was thinking that he also agrees with like the principles. He like roughly agrees the principles that this is based on. Like, and yeah, killing does seem not that great or something. Exciting, but not that great.
I think there was like some overlearning that happened. Basically, like what I might have done initially as like a 7-year-old for transactional reasons. Yeah. Like, I don't know, I created some associations with this idea of like goodness and purity just being generally good for purposes more than just, you know, my selfish interests.
I love that story. It's like a bit like my elephant. It's like so iconic. And it's very representative of like a lot of things that you do when you're religious. You're like, oh, I want to do this, but I can't do it in this way. So what's the looking for loopholes is a classic. Is a classic move.
We're recording this on March 2nd, which is about a week after some billionaire, I don't know her name, but I've seen her picture a whole lot on Twitter lately, gave $1 billion to the Bronx Med School to make tuition free for all the med students. And some folks in the EA universe took exception to this, saying this is a bad use of charitable dollars. What does the couch think?
Wait, sorry, we need further context, which is some people in the EA universe took exception to this. Also, some like people not in the EA universe took exception to this because they were like, I don't know, man, seems like it could have been used better elsewhere, or like also, yeah, whatever. They had other various objections. But then the effective altruism Twitter account, which I believe is run by somebody at EA, I don't know who, quote tweeted the tweet with the billionaire announcing her donation, being like, hey, I'm paraphrasing, hey, this is really great. what a nice thing for you to do. Donate $1 billion. Wow. Also, there are maybe some other more effective ways that you could donate more money if you felt like it. Bye. And then like someone else quote tweeted that being like,
and it did list specific examples of like
yeah,
anti-malaria charities and things like that.
Yeah, which, you know, seemed like a reasonable way to engage with this kind of issue. And then, yeah, another guy called Ben Gross quote tweeted that being like, these bootlickers. Wait, was it Ben Gross who did that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think he did both. So Ben Gross had his own original tweet saying like, I hate this so much about the donation without further explanation. And then when the EA org, had that tweet, his comment was that we were bootlickers, or they were bootlickers.
Being like, the problem with EAs is they like cozy up to billionaires instead of like justifiably criticizing them like it's actually like toothless or something. And I think there's something here to this critique, like, you know, the effective altruism movement is not like the maximally radical thing that is like kill and eat the rich or whatever, you know,
which is obviously the solution to all the world's problems.
Well, it's a radical position that some people take, and I think it has its merits, which are that you get to like not appear to be accepting things that you think are bad. Like, hey,
if you do think they're bad,
yeah, sure. Like I think it's bad actually that this person like gave a whole bunch of money that could have like what was your tweet? Save 200 lives and instead of save 200,000 lives, but instead of save 500 on that or something. I think that was like generously assuming that like all of the lives saved by the medical doctors were counterfactual. Is that right?
Yeah. What I was trying to do was roughly approximate like I don't know, Greg Lewis's thing about doctor counterfactuals. And like improving the quality of a doctor by so much over the course of their career, you expect them to save only about one life given the supply constraints on how many doctors you have. So you're really only making a qualitative difference between the marginal doctor who would or would not have gotten into med school, basically, is what most of the effect is. And that effect, as you might imagine, is very small.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of direct effect. And so I tried to estimate, like, I don't know if med school tuition is,
so they just made it free for everyone. And so like now people that wouldn't have been able to do it can do it. That's the
and presumably they're going to be better doctors or something like that.
Well, so I don't think that's even the effect, right? Because the effect is just making medical doctors who would have had
more diverse or something.
No.
Oh, and also
I think that's just the thing, right? It's just making people who would have had more student debt have no student debt.
Well, some people wouldn't have been able to do it at all, and then were.
Why not? Why couldn't they just get loans?
I don't know. Whatever their situation is, it just seemed too complicated, too hard not to start earning money really soon. That subsidy
brings more people into the pool to be doctors.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the filter becomes quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you have dependents that you know are going to like be eating up a lot of your salary once you start making
you just need money right now.
You like can't afford to take on a load of debt.
Well, I mean, I just don't think this is the right calculation for doctors, though, right? Because the reason people do take on this debt is because it actually just does pay for itself over time because you make enough money as a doctor such that it's worth it. The claim I heard of people defending it was something like, oh, this actually lets those doctors then choose less remunerative paths in the field of medicine that are maybe better for people, but
well, like you just expect them to be undersupplied.
Right.
So like there will be a bunch of different effects. There doesn't have to be one. And I think we've mentioned a lot of them.
But the doctors don't have their hands tied whatsoever. You can speculate that that's going to be the thing. Doctors are going to do what doctors are going to do. I think the main effect is you've just increased the pool of candidates because it's now more financially attractive to go to med school than it was before. Yes, obviously.
I mean, no, that's true. But like, I think, I'm just not sure that I'm not sure just what the
biggest
predictable effects of that actually are, even on the quality of the candidate.
Yeah, I think I was being charitable in the 500 lives thing. Yeah. Anyway, I think the interesting conversation that kind of got launched from this was about the Copenhagen interpretation of ethics, because one thing that I don't know if it was Ben Gross or like some other kind of commentator kind of brought up is like, oh, you know, you guys, whenever someone does something for charity, you dump all over them. Why don't you dump on the people buying yachts or like, you know, going on vacations and crazy things like this all the time? And I don't know, I'm sort of like sympathetic at like a meta level to the idea of like, you know, gently criticizing people's charitable decisions rather than their like consumption decisions. Just because it's like more within the Overton window, if that makes sense. Like, like to a third party observer, like if you just like picked on every rich person you could find and said, oh, look at all this personal consumption they're doing, they could be giving it to charity, that just feels like a very, very big leap. And the person is like, all right, you just want people to do your thing, good for you, that's everyone in the world. Whereas if someone has already decided that they're going to commit a large amount of their money to helping the world, it almost feels like you're, as the effective altruism work did, giving them a helpful suggestion for how they could do that better. It's like, we're actually quite close here, and maybe you can consider these other things. And this just seems like a reasonable position versus saying, you need to totally turn your life around, person. Yeah. And this is just like, maybe it's better messaging. What do we think?
I don't know. I think it depends who your target is. Like, I think if you're trying to, like, do outreach to ultra high net worth individuals, you are obviously going to have a better time if you're looking at people who are looking to do good with their money or who are, sympathetic to that kind of thing generally than people who are like, no, I want more bigger yachts. But if you're trying to, talk on Twitter, that's a public outreach platform. Most of the people in there are not ultra high net worth individuals. Maybe there's one who's reading every tweet, but probably not. And I think, it's a little more unclear to me what the better message is for that public.
I'm not on Twitter. I mean, that maybe says things of how I would react to this and other things. And maybe it's a segue to Club. But, and this is very personal. I don't feel excited. I don't feel very excited about, telling people what to do. and I can feel more uncomfortable than most people talking about what people very broadly should do, or this particular person who did this thing. I feel just like, I'm not saying never do it, and just live your life and stop bossing around. No, I think there's definitely a space for but I don't know, my personal limits are something like, are you in the room with this person? Or something? I don't know.
I think there just are some opportunities here to positively influence the discourse around these ideas in a way that just does seem really good. And this happens a lot. This is just kind of how the news works, right? Which is that events happen, and then what you try and do is you try and take those events and talk about them in a way that you think spreads ideas you think are important. A lot often happens. A while ago, it was probably a long time ago now, but there was somebody who killed a lion, and people got really mad about the lion that was killed. Yeah. And then some people, maybe in the EA universe, maybe otherwise, or certainly in the animal universe, were well, if you care about the killing of Cecil the lion, maybe you should care about all the chickens who get killed and tortured before they're eaten. And so that, and obviously it's in some ways that just has nothing to do with the Cecil the Lion case at all, but it's just a way of talking about something you think is important. And that's one thing that's going on here, right? Which is somebody made a charitable decision, and that's just an easy way to talk about how to think about making charitable decisions. And there are better and worse ways, I think, of
I think I just have a very complicated relationship with the kind of whole influencing kind of mechanism that you described. Yeah. It doesn't feel, some people, that's part of their life and who they are and what they think they're doing in life. And I feel very weird about, it doesn't feel like it's something I've chosen for that to be in my life. Mm-hmm. But it is a bit weird when you're involved with the EA and are also saying, I'm not going to take part of big global conversations in public platforms or something. I mean, I guess maybe my preference is something if you're going to do something like that, use something that happened to just have a public discussion about something. A very long podcast episode is definitely my where I can say lots of nuance. It would definitely be my preferred way. And short, very austere messages that don't have a lot of hedging, and I just become very naturally uncomfortable about saying a short sentence in reaction to some big thing and that kind of.
One thing that frustrated me about some of the discussion afterwards was some people just said some things that were clearly untrue and showed just bad thinking about these topics. I saw one reaction where somebody was defending the billionaires' decision and said something along the lines of, look, they made this decision. It means some people are going to get free tuition to medical school, which seems really good for them. And it doesn't mean more people with malaria are going to die as a result. And I was like, that's actually just not true, because there just are opportunity costs in the world, and people aren't good about thinking about it.
I mean, can I fight you about it?
Sure, let's fight about it.
Yeah.
Well, so I mean, so in the specific malaria case
Yeah,
of malaria,
yeah.
it's actually not true. Like, I'm not sure if the gap of funding for malaria nets or other ways of preventing the disease is actually $1 billion, such that like you'd actually, but like there just are neglected causes
Yeah.
in the world, and like the fact that we're not doing something about them is just it's just like is a cost to the choices we're making.
Obviously, I super agree with the object level of all of that.
Yeah.
But especially when like trying to assess the like opportunity cost and counterfactuals and stuff like that, I think like a classic kind of thing that people in the EA community and just people in general do is like present counterfactuals that are not really counterfactuals, like present possibilities of the universe that were not possibilities in the universe, and like the thing here is something like forgetting that humans are humans and people have their psychology and stuff. So I'm like thinking about like, were this person, I don't know who, and you probably briefly said, but I already forgot who this person is.
Oh, I
and,
didn't
like,
know
anything
either.
about
I forget
them.
her name.
Oh, like her name. You just said like I even forgot like just anything about them, and like it all just really depends on how possible it was for this person to have been open to a different like giving decision or not, and if like, and these are things that it's like kind of between you and God kind of thing. Like if her psychology was like that was her, out of the possibilities that her brain and her knowledge of the world and her disposition in that moment, this was like the most charitable thing she could do, then this actually was the best outcome of all, because that was
So I think this is one reason people talk about these issues more around something like putatively unwise charitable decision rather than like buying yachts or something, because charitable decisions often do seem like something where like it really does seem very contingent. Like if you just thought about like another cause at the time that you're thinking about a charitable decision, like it's just there's so little cost on you to making that change, right? You just,
but that's obvious to you. I guess I'm trying to situate myself. When I found out about the stuff that EAs did and researched, my mind was blown. It was really blown. I did not, in a good way. I was like, all these possibilities.
This is underscoring Cody's point, though. I think what people are trying to do when they like critique this decision is blow some people's minds in the future to say like, look at what was possible.
Yeah. That is very fair. I guess what I'm trying to say is also that it can be really easy to be in a situation where there is no way you could have thought about making a better charitable decision. Like, especially, I don't know if this is a like not developed world thing or not. Like I grew up in Costa Rica and like it is not developed. It is also not developed. So it's like the middle income country. And like also like I guess I don't know, my age and stuff, I wasn't like this internet person. Like I wasn't part of like the bigger world through the internet when I was younger and stuff. So I just, my take on like doing making the world better at like when I was like 18 or something was you can't. I just didn't think it was possible that people would get together and do research and organize, charities, institutions or whatever, or even policy at a level of like sincerity and trying to do something useful and good that actually was happening in the world. I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying it always is what is promised or something, but I didn't know this thing was happening, and I had the information I had about the world kind of suggested that it wasn't possible. And like if someone had told me, I saw like for me charity was like, let's pay for a bunch of Americans to paint a school. Yeah. And I saw that and I'm like, oh, here's a bunch of Americans painting a school.
like Americans who came to Costa Rica
Yeah.
to do that? Yeah.
Yeah, but like I think I had this or something like this perspective too growing up, right? Like I was very much despairing. I was just like, well, there's all these problems in the world and there's like absolutely nothing that, I'm going to do or that really anyone can do. We're just all going to die and it's just going to be terrible forever. But I think that eventually I ended up changing my mind about that, right?
Yeah.
And like, why did I do it? I did it because I don't know, I learned stuff, I read stuff, I spoke to people, and ultimately my psychology was malleable.
Yeah.
And I think that we're doing these people a disservice if we say something like, oh well, there was just no world in which like she could have considered something different. Something,
I think you're right.
instead I'm like, no, like she's a person like us, and like maybe, you know, there was something that somebody could have intervened at some point where she would have gone, oh, okay, actually, yeah, you know, I don't just care about Americans, or I don't just...
Yeah, you're swaying me. Wait, can we just very quickly go back to religions just for a bit before we... Because there's still something I wanted to say, and I felt like I didn't.
Okay.
It was just that the way you described being religious, and I think this is true for many of the ex-religious EA people I have met. And maybe it's just a bit too basic, but I still want to reflect on it. It's something like there seems to be a personality trait which is about not just living life like you're this leaf that's just floating around or something. You're like, okay, here's some rules that I maybe believe and have been presented with. Now I'm going to organize my life around it, and I'm going to try to do a specific thing. And that sounded like your religiousness was a bit like that. My religiousness was definitely a bit like that. It's like there's this whole set of things that I think are maybe true, but most even more than true seem important and wise or something like that. And I'm not gonna just be like, okay, by rules. I'm gonna be like, okay, now I'm gonna, you know, structure my life around this as you do. And then I guess I was like, oh wait, maybe those. I guess eventually I started doubting the whole package or something. But I still feel like I'm the kind of person where I'm like, well, what's the new package or something? And there is some sort of risk there where if you're like package of rules oriented, when the answers are not neat, you might want to make them neat. You might want to substitute, you know, like you might just want to have it to fix a set of guidelines where that's just not what exists. That's not how life looks. But yeah, so there's pros and cons. Like I think the pros are I try to do particular things based on my beliefs sometimes and stuff like that, which seems correct for you too as well.
I mean, look,
and like all of us probably.
I'm gonna swim out into some deep waters of speculation here, but like there is kind of like this depression crisis in the developed world. Like almost the richer your country is, the more people are depressed there, the more people are suicidal there, and things like that. Here's the theory, right? Is like that is like derivative of a certain nihilism that comes from having all your needs met, where it's just like you don't have to like wake up and urgently like track down food for yourself. You don't have to urgently like seek shelter or like treat your like wounds or diseases all the time because you're mostly healthy most of the time. And there's nothing that nature is imposing on you as like an urgent thing that like gives you purpose. So you've got to find your own purpose. And like, I don't know, we evolved to have the structure of nature just always bearing down on us. And so like, I think one way that people get themselves out of depression is to make some artificial nature that bears down on them, some urgency, right? And like pleasing God, definitely some of that. Satisfying the strictures of morality satisfies that. Getting swole also satisfies that. Lots of options, people. So no, I think like this might be a later kind of discovered benefit of having this intuition.
Yeah. I mean, that's a for the person benefit. You also like most of the time when you're doing stuff like that, you also think you're not only doing it for yourself. There's also you care about the object level of the outcomes you're going to have.
There's a certain self-deception
but it is a nice kind of second thing that happens. I mean, I do agree that not having a purpose is deeply confusing and demoralizing, and you don't really know what to do at the time, and you didn't really know how to prioritize things. And you just try to, it's not great.
Okay, have you made your point?
Yeah.
Why'd you quit ADK?
Okay.
Wait, so yeah, what's the background? Yeah, when did you leave?
I left, what year is now? 2004. I left in mid-2022, I believe. Something like that.
Yeah. And when did you start at ADK?
Depends what starting means. Mm-hmm. I started I used to work as a graphic designer, and ADK started being one of my clients. I would do like some jobs for ADK, graphic design jobs in like 2015. That went on for several years, like 15 and 16, and then I think 2017 I started not doing work for any other people. But I was still a freelance graphic designer, but it was like I did a lot for ADK that year or something like that. I mean, this is quite fuzzy. And then 2018, I became like a normal permanent employee or something like that.
Yeah, did you start working for ADK because of EA, or was it just like a graphic design client?
It was definitely not just a client. but it definitely, just doing work for them definitely made me be more like,
Oh, what's going on here?
yeah, yeah, what's going on with this group of people? It started because I asked for career advice,
Oh.
and they're like, what about just work? Do you want that? And I was like, yeah, also that.
Nearly the same thing.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's so good.
It was fun.
Maria, I'm not sure if I told you this story before, maybe I have, but like when I first joined, or like a couple weeks after I joined or something, I was like digging through the Google Drive looking for something. I ended up finding like a report that you'd made about like, I think it was your work on the like 2017 video that we did that was like a most pressing problems video. It was like 4 minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember being so intimidated by how good the report was. What? I know. I was like,
I don't even remember that this exists.
I know. Of course you don't. It was like probably just like your average Tuesday. But I was like, oh my
God. Are you
God.
sure it wasn't like Rob who did it?
I'm pretty damn confident that it was like your writing throughout, because you were like writing in the first person, being like, I did blah blah blah, and I was like, oh, clearly, like,
oh yeah, I feel so happy. Not that I intimidated you, but
no, but it was. I was like, this is incredibly competent. Like, how am I gonna get this competent? You know, it was like one of those things like really like set a fire under my seat. I was like, I'm gonna
thank you
I'm gonna
so
do
much
stuff
for
that's like
sharing
as good as
that.
this. Yeah,
I feel like I'm not a. I don't know. You definitely made me feel less insecure for that. So thank you.
I think it's true.
Okay, so Maria, you were an amazing employee at 80K. You were writing reports that inspired future employees, but then you left. Why did you leave?
I left. Okay, so I kind of love this opportunity to talk about it. So I'm gonna indulge in
More preamble, everyone. Just, like,
I'm gonna indulge in the portfolio reasons why I left, as opposed to being just like, oh, this simplistic one-liner Twitter why I left or something. So I remember the day I was like, oh, I think I should leave. Because I was preparing the plan for the job board for the next year. I think it was like 2021, and I was like drafting the 2022 plan. And then I saw it, and I felt proud. I was like, this is a good plan. If these things happen, the job board will do great. I think these things should happen. So I don't have I feel confident on the plan. And I also feel confident that I don't want to be the one executing that. Like the things that needed to be done were not things I was excited about. And there was no chance, I was pretty confident that they needed to be done. So I just felt like the wrong person suddenly. And that didn't feel weird or problematic, because like the job board was still quite young, and it just seemed natural that in very different stages of like programs, organizations, like the character of a person that you need to do the very early stage work might be very different from the character of people who might be good later on. So that didn't feel weird. I'm just like, oh, me, manager? We need to hire some people, and I need to be a boss, and I'm not sure about my abilities there, and I'm not sure it's the right time to even try those abilities. So that's when it started, and I messaged my manager, and I was like, I'm not sure. But it was a very kind of chill, I'm not sure I'm the right person for this role right now. Okay, and then the second layer is that, yeah, I feel like there was always this weird, I'm uncomfortable feeling about me working at 80K that was so, I could not put my finger on what was wrong. And it just took forever for me to like investigate what was going on and like reach the point where I could talk about it to people, because it was so cloudy or something. And so like it was confusing, because I'm like, it's not the people, okay? I've never been able to like people that I work with so much as right now. I deeply respect my coworkers. So it's like nothing about, like, yeah, some of us will have different working styles, and I prefer working with some of them to others, but like, and like, the people are the organizations. There's not the people, what is it, or something. I don't know. Anyways, it took ages. One time Howie gave me some of the biggest advice and the best advice, where like, I think we just talked for like an hour about really fuzzily about what I was feeling and what was going on. And then at the end of it, he said, it was a long conversation, and he said, I feel like you haven't gotten to the crux of what's wrong, and I think like you should figure it out. And that was really great advice, because sometimes when you think a lot about a thing, you're very torn between, is it worth it to think more and have the hope of clarity, or am I just doing loops here in a thing that is hopeless that I just need to stop obsessing over? And you can feel like you don't know which of those is the case. And Howie was like, it seems like there's a crux, and like you could get to it and just try to get to it. I think I eventually did. And I think the crux is, I feel really uncomfortable participating in a big thing that in some way is about telling people somewhat like, do this or do that. So like kind of the activity of like
Career advice.
or anything advice. Like, if the word advice is in it, I'm already like, oh gosh, oh no, I'm so uncomfortable.
Oh, man.
Or like, yeah.
I feel like I really want to know more about this. One thing is like, I feel like one way you could view ATK is that we're opinionated.
Yeah.
And we're like, look, the thing we feel pretty confident in, on that we're going to like tell you to do on like our, page 1 is that like you've got like 80,000 hours in your career. It's a pretty big deal. You should probably care about it.
Yeah.
And like beyond that, like here's our thoughts on like how you can care about it, like what it would mean and what that would mean you do. But like otherwise it's mostly like you should probably just think about it some.
Yeah.
And like that just seems so uncontroversial to me. Does that not?
That seems uncontroversial to me, but like I'm gonna get pretty like trying to push back a lot, but this is just me being a lot of who I am as opposed to like trying to think what the right thing is or something. The me says something like, yeah, I mean, but that's something that can be done in one blog post once by one person, right? So surely there's a lot more going on in 80K that's not just that, because if it was just about making one point that is clear and very basic, then you can just make that one point and like make the article super famous and keep referring to it and like, but
Yeah,
like why do you need this whole like enterprise around like
Because we're also opinionated, and so we're going to spend a lot of time being
Yeah.
like, here's all the stuff that we think.
yeah. So like the first thing I don't think would make me uncomfortable, but it would also not employ me.
Yeah, and then the second thing is OpenPhil not telling people what to do.
I mean, one thing that makes me really happy, like really liberated about working at OpenPhil is that we're not only telling like that only a little part of OpenPhil is funds meta like EA stuff. That actually matters a lot for my personal morale.
Sorry,
and-
I guess, the level on which I meant like telling people what to do is I'm like, here, you can have a grant to do this, or no, you can't have a grant to do this, is like telling them what to do.
Oh, I see that as extremely different. I see that as someone made their money, someone being Dustin, and has their money and is willing to give it away for things that they're on board with and not for others. But like, people can do whatever they want, and like to get his money, they need to have some sorts of plans that he is excited about. He / OpenPhil research staff is excited about. Or
So
something.
this just seems like a direct analog with 80K, right? It's like, to follow our advice, you should like go work in whatever fields we tell you to. But like otherwise, you can do whatever you want,
I mean, yeah, obviously 80K does have a very...
I do often frame my like one-on-one conversations and being like, look, there's this place, Open Philanthropy, and I can explain to you what they care about if you want their money, and like here's how you can navigate to that.
yeah.
If you're into it. And I mean, it matters whether you're into it and you whether like do a good job at it. And I think they'll be able to tell if you're into it and if you've done your homework.
I mean,
But
I
this
think
is
you're
awesome.
asking great questions because they're the questions that get at the bottom of what is the thing that I'm averse to that
you
like
actually don't
sometimes
like.
is the thing and sometimes isn't the thing.
Yeah.
And I don't even understand it very well, so I'm going to try to respond, but I'm not sure. Yeah, so like, what's the difference? Like, obviously 80K isn't like saying anything like, and everyone should agree with the things we're saying and do them.
But it is implicit, right? Like it's like we think this is our best guess. Like here's what we think.
I
is
mean, I
true.
even think that a lot of you would think that there are many cases in life and many types of personalities and situations where someone should just not
yeah.
the
Yeah,
advice
seems right as
doesn't
well.
apply and just don't worry about it or something. It's something weird about like, what are the incentives? Who is saying what? Who is doing like with the money? I'm like, here's some money. People can do things if they want this money. I don't know. There's something like super pure
I was
and clean
just
to
gonna
me
say that, yeah.
about that. What like who the actors are and what are the transactions that are happening. Whereas in 80K, I'm like, okay, these people are not doing any of the money. They're doing some connections. They're trying to advocate. And also, like, I mean, maybe let's start with, because it's a whole world. So, like, maybe let's start with a simple one, which is, like, I feel like there is a kind of blurred, I don't know what 80K, I get a mixed message about, are we just saying, if you're interested, here's some things, or are we also advocating for some things?
What's the difference?
Yeah.
It boils down to language, I would think. And like how you actually talk about the thing.
I mean, like, what's the language of the problem profiles? It's like, this is our best guess at the world's most pressing problems or something like that. And
We also say we're pretty confident we're wrong about it in some way, but
Yeah.
then like the next sentence after that is like, here's a link on the page to where you can form your own list because you'll probably disagree in various ways.
Yeah.
Like, some people will tell us we're too equivocal and like we don't take enough positions on the websites.
Weirdly, I can sometimes put myself in the position where you guys also are don't have a strong enough take or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like I kind of do come at this from like a pretty opposite way to you, which is like before this I was in journalism and in the news business, and like I would like I've like written opinion pieces and stuff, but a lot of like the work of like news is like I think is often like hiding the ball on how much you have an opinion, which is even just like so much like you've written an article, and the fact that you've written an article means you think that's one of the most important things for you to be writing about that day, and like there's just this thing of news judgment, which is deciding what the topic of the article is and what the headline should focus on. Like it's a thing you're trained in, and it's called news judgment, but it's often very morally loaded, and like in a way that I think is fine in practice, except that like it's just hard to be totally honest about that. I wish there was like a paragraph in every news story that was like, here's why we're writing about this, like, and this really matters because X, Y, and Z. And like they almost never do that part, right? Like they have this idea that a lot of news articles just have this idea that like, oh well, like of course this is the thing that we're writing about, and that's kind of implicit, and like the reason we made that choice we're not going to explain.
It's like it's the news of the day. It's like
yeah, exactly. It just happens to be what came up, even though like there's like basically an infinity of things they could write about, and like an infinity of different ways you could frame the same news story. They make judgment calls on all of this, like informed in part by their opinions. And yeah, the thing I kind of like in some ways better about working at ADK is like we're just upfront about the fact that like we're working on this stuff because we think it's one of the most important problems in the world. Here's how we try and think about how different problems are important. Here's our take on it. Like, and like, yeah, you're welcome to disagree with us, but like, you came to the site, you're interested in these takes. Here's what we think about them, and we just try and be as upfront as possible with that.
I think I also like that about it. I mean, one thing to be said about this disposition of mine that makes working at a place like ADK hard is that I think it's never ending. Like you can just be like, yeah, but this makes sense because of that, and then I'll be like, yeah, but then I don't like this part about it, and I don't like that part about it, and I think that is why it's ultimately really good that I left, because it is like I just think I was starting to have bitterness. I actually remember interacting with you. We're like joyful and happy, and I just was in the kitchen. I said something really bitter. And you were like very new and on board, and I was like, oh, I'm just this unpleasant Grinch, aren't I? And like
I didn't experience you as a Grinch.
I felt very bitter, and like if you're in a situation where ultimately you think people are doing good things, it can even be like a relationship or something, and because of your personality, your like idiosyncrasies, you're gonna always or almost always have a difficulty with what's going on and keep adding layers of bitterness. You should just get out and let people do their good work.
I respect that so much. I'm like, if you like, obviously this is not attainable for everybody, but the ideal, I think, is to have like a job where you are just actually joyful about doing it. And I think, oh man, it really annoys me how much like disagreeing sentiment with this there is out there. They're like, no, you need to like get through your work, you need to find something that's like tolerable. And I'm like, no, like if you like try really hard to find something that you actually are just excited about, and you're like, wow, this is great, and you have no bitterness, or like minimal, whatever, you don't feel like you're just kind of like shouldering some kind of burden, and that'd be really great.
I mean, I think that's huge. That's a huge topic where like, I don't mean you spend so many hours of your life doing whatever it is that your job is. Not from an altruistic education perspective.
How many exactly?
I don't know how many. It must be a big.
I think it's like 70.
It must be some big number.
75.
And like from a purely your own happiness perspective, and from like a not altruistic for the rest of the world, but just the happiness of you and those who work with you.
Yeah. I think maybe also
just
altruistic
like,
rest of the world.
Try to be happy.
Like,
and also ultimately.
Yeah, because like ultimately, like
we
let's say you stayed doing the job board, right?
Yeah.
And then you felt increasingly bitter about it. And like, how good would the 2023 plan have been? I don't know.
That's
like,
exactly right. I mean, I think this is a classic EA mistake, or like people who are too rational mistake, which like, you're a little animal. When you're happy, you do things well, and when you're sad, you're chewing up the couch. Like you're like a little dog. Like you're also this higher brain thing, but there's some very basic mammal things that apply to how well you're gonna do things, or like how proud are you, how happy are you, and stuff like that. And like, don't try to circumvent those too much and make them too complicated, because they're gonna keep applying to you as a person or something.
I don't want to overstate the stakes. I do think there's an opposite extreme, which is also like can be harmful for people, where they're like, well, I must only do the thing where there's like nothing bad about it, and I'm like always the most happiest because
Absolutely.
like I have sometimes experienced people trying to do this and they end up
Yeah.
feeling really sad because
Yeah.
there's nothing that's like that.
I mean, it's so hard to say things where the
Yeah.
true thing is a balanced thing, but I think you're totally right. Like, I would not change. I have stayed sometimes doing projects or things for a while that felt effortful and like I wouldn't change that for anything.
Yeah.
Like there are right times in life to be like, I need to learn about myself and about this thing and about why it's being hard, or the outcome is just too precious to me. There's lots of circumstances why you might want to do something that's...
Or you are the kind of person who can really persevere in adversity and you just find that
Exactly,
great, and
exactly.
maybe that's the right call for you.
Yeah.
I'm just not that hardcore.
Yeah, I think it depends for me.
Bella, you're blossoming into hardcoredom. That's my opinion.
I take that as the
Blossoming
compliment.
into
It's not like that.
hardcoredom is such a mad compliment. What were you saying? Some things about ADK being upfront. Yeah, that seems very right. Like, maybe I can say some things that randomly trigger my I don't want to tell people what to do buttons or something. One is like, and please remember, these are not arguments. These are just, I'm never going to be happy about them or something. Kind of. One is just like the whole, and it has gotten a lot better, but the whole like, we're just saying it, we're not doing the thing. Like, there's a world where like the people giving advice just have the role that they're giving advice on or something like that. Yeah. Instead of like an ADK organization, some like conglomerate of like network, like blogging people that like give advice and some consulting, but like have the job and do the job or something like that. And I know you do connect people to a lot of people like that, so you're not like saying I have all the details and I'm gonna give you dumb details that are not from the people in the field. You do actually lead people to those kinds of connections. But I just always gonna feel a bit awkward about like the people who are writing it are not doing like just saying something where like a lot of effort and energy and years and jobs are put into saying things that are not coming from like
the primary source.
Yeah. That just makes me a bit like, hey.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some like real inauthenticity here, and there's also like chances for us to fuck up, right? Because like if we aren't like deeply involved in the fields that we're talking about, like we'll lose interest, lose a lot of detail, and maybe get things wrong.
Yeah.
But I think there's authenticity in another way.
Yeah.
Right, which is just like the specialization of labor thing.
Yeah.
It's much harder for somebody who's like really crushing it in some field to like also really crush it at like. Of
course.
Yeah.
It just seems like I completely agree with the kind of honesty and like. Well, it seems like people are not just... I mean, some people are overachievers and have the time and kind of behave that way. Sure. But, like, mostly you kind of need to organize and pay a group of people to do this apart because it's too much work or something. And I think too much of your attention, of someone's attention.
The, like, historical success of ATK is just, like, a good test case for that for that kind of argument. Where it's like, no, actually, having some people who are thinking full-time are like, what should even people do?
Yeah.
Like, pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm just always... My brain is always going to be, like, icked about a bunch of stuff around that. Mm-hmm. What's another thing... I probably would always be icked about. I mean, the whole just... It wouldn't have to be the case necessarily, but just the fact that there is a community around this, that it's called EA, and that it already has a bunch of things that are, to me, reminiscent, maybe a little bit of past things I experienced when I was religious and stuff like that. That really doesn't help me feel super comfortable. Like, in-group, out-group, status, all these types of dynamics. And ADK could just definitely still exist if like the EA community wasn't like an EA community. Yeah. And so it's kind of like not even its fault at all or anything, but just that proximity makes it hard for me.
I do appreciate you coming on my very community-oriented podcast.
I know.
Though.
Thank you. Well, it was only because I knew you'd let me talk about the stuff. Do you want to explain Club to people?
Club is your invention, Maria.
Oh, no, I definitely did not. When I explained it to you, did I claim it? No.
You were the first person who I heard use the term.
I see. No, I read it. It was beautiful. I almost cried when I read it. It was hilarious. It's I don't even know what the source is. Club. I'm just gonna do it such bad justice.
So,
but
listeners, if you can find an instance of someone using the term club before Maria at dinner with me in 2021 sometime,
I'm
there's
pretty
no
sure.
prize because I'll lose more money.
I'm pretty sure. Oh, was it already found?
Oh my God. We were just totally wrong from the off. This is actually something I wanted to talk about, right? Is like, Hana knew that Steelman had been used before her in one specific instance. She just didn't think it was interesting, noteworthy, or memorable because she knew that it wasn't the original instance. Luke Milhauser had used it on Less Wrong. But Hana was like, oh, that wasn't the original instance, so I don't care. We still don't know where it is. But that clearly means that it wasn't Hana.
Yeah, actually forgot to mention that. Yeah, forgot.
Hence, Matt loses 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Thanks, listeners.
Well, I feel like I did not dream about this, but like, there's just some funny poster somewhere. I think not even a single source. It's just like a cultural. I don't know. Anyway, club is this thing where like there's a club, and the thing that it is about is being in the club. So instead of being like the bike riders club or the moviegoers club, is the club. Yeah. And it's almost this like, to me, it has this kind of a bit of a like Waiting for Godot kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? What's that kind of theater?
Self-referentiality? Or
No, there's
futility?
like that type of theater has a name. What's the word?
Surrealist.
No.
No. I know.
It starts with A.
Absurdist.
Absurdist, thank you. It has this absurdist vibe of like, and we need the money for the pizza, and we need the money, and there's like roles, and like the people who advertise, and then
We need the
people,
money for the pizza and the pizza
like,
for the money.
there's
Of course.
bureaucracy and like a lot of there's whole ecosystem flourishes around making the club work, and the club is about the club.
I mean, aren't there just tons of these in real life?
Oh,
Like,
there's
like,
tons of these in real
like
life.
the Elks and the.
I don't know what that is, but I do think there's.
It's a club. It's just like people who like just get together in their community and just spend time together.
Oh no,
The
but
Freemasons
club.
spend very little time talking about masonry.
I mean, club. The thing about club is that if the club is about spending time together,
Yeah.
I don't think that is quite a club.
Oh, okay.
It's just a club about spending time together with people, and usually based on some particular kind of thing. But it can even not be based on some particular kind of thing.
Yeah.
But club is about the club itself, not spending time with people, which is the object level layer. It's about
I mean, yeah, I think that.
yeah. I mean, it's hard to sustain because it's a ridiculous thing. But anyways, when I was still kind of like very not even understanding my own emotions about what made me uncomfortable about like working someplace that told people what to do and that vibe, I used to refer to people as like my club feelings. And there's also, they're even stronger when they're not even about ADK and they're just like about the EA community in general.
Yeah.
But isn't the EA community very much not a club?
Oh,
club?
it's definitely not. Like, there is so much object level, like... So, like, I don't think...
But even small steps in the direction
It's just
of
like
madness
anyone who's
triggers
trying
somewhere.
to do a thing where a community starts being built on the object level thing starts to sometimes have some things that feel a bit clubby.
Sure.
And, like, these kinds of things really trigger me.
Interesting.
But, like, absolutely, there is no...
Would you say you're probably overly sensitive to
Yes.
clubbiness? Okay.
I think I am,
Because-
like...
I mean, so I can get this feeling about orgs sometimes, right? Which is like we just have like a decent size operations team
Yeah.
at ADK. And like sometimes I'm like, wait, why do we need like operations teams such that the other teams can keep functioning? But it's like, of course you do. Like,
Yeah.
I think this is like a failure
Yeah.
on my part to like fully conceptualize what organizations need. But like sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, like do we even just need somebody who's like taking care of the finances? And it's like, yeah, of course you do.
Yeah, of course you do. No, I think, I mean, a whole thing of I struggled with these emotions for a bit is that I do think that they're coming from like a oversensitive to that place. So they were not only, they often, the arguments fell apart or they were like too exaggerated or something like that. So like, I think I erred for a couple of years in like, has some negative vibe of a thing, when inspects it with reason, finds that can't really hold the complaint up, make it stand, hence thinks intuition's wrong, bad, dumb, keep doing what you're doing because you can't really argue against it. And I think the right move was like, I don't know, like personality not happy, seems hard to change,
Yeah, does this connect back to what you were discussing earlier about the intuitions and morality and like you kind of...
Well, this definitely connects back to having been religious and having been in a church and having seen. I don't like. The word community makes me cringe. And like, if it's very grassroots, like people got together, like if it's almost like indistinguishable from literally a group of friends, I'm like, yeah, nice, love, friendship, community, intimacy. But as long as when organization starts to happen,
You're just an anarchist.
I think the word community also makes me cringe, but maybe for very different reasons. And I feel like one thing is it really irks me whenever people talk about decisions or actions happening at the level of the community, because when they say this, they usually mean like some particular prominent individual within the community, or like it's just really hard to like actually analyze like sentiment and action at the level of like a group of people who are heterogeneous and individuals. Anyway, whatever, that's one thing. Then I think the other thing is I'm just like, it is often associated with like, if you're doing something for the community, it is inherently morally good. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? So like, I watch a lot of crochet drama videos.
can you say that again?
Crochet,
Got it. Crochet.
and
Unpack
like,
it.
fabric arts generally. So
Drama.
fiber arts, sorry.
The
Yes.
quilters are savage.
They really.
Oh,
So-
drama in their community.
Yes.
Oh,
So
go
I
on.
don't knit, I don't sew, I don't do any fiber arts.
Their drama is just great.
Their drama's so good, and it's very like it's exactly the kind of like gossip and drama that I love, which is like it's low stakes. Ultimately, nobody really cares. Well, there was one time a lady faked her own death, but otherwise, it's like yeah, I know, but like mostly it's like you copied my yarn design. No, I didn't. It's like just kind of a vest. Well, I'm angry about it. And I'm going to block you on all social media and tell all my followers that you're evil. That's like the level of it.
Have you seen the drama in the fountain pen community recently?
No, but apparently it's
that sounds
wild.
great drama.
Tell me about it.
I might even become
Okay.
genuinely actually invested
you can add your
because
story.
pens are great. Anyway, sorry.
I've like heard secondhand that the fountain pen drama is great. I can't wait to learn about it. Okay. But anyway, like I was like watching this video this morning. Sorry, the main person I watched is like a YouTuber called like Emma in the Moment who like does videos about this. And they were like making a video about, in response to the community drama, one of the people was like, I'm gonna like heal the crochet I'm gonna heal the like indie fabric dyer community by like making a load of Instagram stories where I like shout out 8 different like fabric dyers that you can follow. And I'm like, how is these people are just, they're merchants. They're selling wool. That's their job. How is this like some kind of like great act of defiance against like the void? Like it's not. You're helping people make sales for their business, but because you use the word community of like the indie dyer community, now it's like good somehow.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I do think he is pretty good. But like one intuition, before I completely left religiousness, I was very, very tempted to become a Catholic.
Okay.
And the reason was I was a Christian all my life. And Christians do a lot of, with respect to Christians, my experience of Christianity was that there was a lot of club. Like, there's just a lot of peripheral activities, right? The kind of church I went to, there's like, you go to church and then you chat and there was food and you had friends and then you went out and there was camp. And I felt like a lot of the time the people were coming because it was nice to be around other people or because of a bunch of things that were not about being true to God, and that made me it just made it seem I didn't want it for that reason. I do also like people and I like friends and I like socializing, but I was feeling lonely in my search for God inside a church because it stopped being about that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, look at the Catholics. They make it really boring. Like, you just have to go and sit there and you listen to the actual really important content and then you leave. Like, if you go, you care about God. Like, there's no other, why else would you go?
I mean, I grew up Catholic, but Catholicism has so much club elements.
Yeah,
there's these bishops, and then they have like, and it has like a whole city to themselves,
Yeah.
and they have all this money.
That's
and
a great
like,
point.
And it's about growing the church for the purpose of having the church grow, and like
from a bureaucracy standpoint, you're completely correct.
Having the church grow is not club. That's like getting people to heaven club.
Yeah.
But the point of the Catholic Church is that it is the church. Like there's like why couldn't they just know about God and read the Bible? It's like, no, you have to do it through the Catholic.
Yeah.
But I mean, at least they like genuinely think that, right?
Sure.
Like,
No.
I think mostly when you say something's clubby, you just mean there's like some wrong vibes. Obviously, most people in the world are just trying to achieve some concrete things, but there's some kind of loopy thing going on that seems wrong. And then what's another trait? Is something like, and I think I got this from religiousness, and I'm grateful to Christianity / religion in general for having given me this, because I like it about myself. I just really value acting sincerely and being really sure about what your motivations for something are, and not letting yourself roll into situations where you're not sure what your incentives are and other people's, and like this kind of what you see is what you get, being really transparent about what I want, being really transparent about why I'm doing the thing I'm doing, why is my job because I need money, is it because I want to help, is it both, how much, like I'm just really into that kind of purity of like maybe intentions purity is something, and it's a bit, I mean, I like it about myself. It can also be a pain in the ass if you can also feel too like high and mighty if you overvalue those things, and I think life is complicated, and to some extent if you like that kind of stuff too much, like me, you can just be weirdly wanting life to be different from what it actually is, because it's just not that simple. So like there's some of like rejection of reality going on there that I'm not sure how healthy it is, but just at some dose of it, I like kind of being in my couch in my like Sunday afternoons and not having that much of like, why am I where I am at again? If I'm like in this club role, I feel a bit more like, why was I doing, what's my life about again? It was supposed to be about this suffering thing, but now I do this thing because of that thing, and then that will create that thing, so that's why I'm doing this other thing. Oh, and then that kind of spiritually, so to speak, seems harmful to me or something.
And open fill pays you closer to your market value, so it clarifies a bunch of decisions around pay.
Like part of my period, I love kind of money clarity. I love money clarity around money. I love like, this is your job, you get paid, I do this many hours. I loved like open fill had like a very clear section on like, it was like, yeah, we're clear, 40 hours a week is a normal thing. It was like, what, just like went deeper on like just a lot of clarity of like what was expected of you and that kind of stuff. And
then you have your couch on Sunday.
Yeah.
And today you've had your couch on Saturday.
Yeah. With nice people.
Back at 80K. A little too meta maybe, but a couch nonetheless. We got to wrap up.
Yeah. Well, it's been a while, I guess.
Yeah. So Maria, once at 80K, back at 80K, but departing again because we have to go, folks. All right. See ya.
Thank you.